In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the OS module in Python and also how to create directories and, more importantly, how to work with temp files and directories. So we'll take a look at how Python handles the creation of temporary directories. You can store information and then of course you can remove them. So this module contains everything that you need to know about file and directory operations. So Python OS module can be used to perform several tasks such as finding the name of the present working directory, changing the current directory, checking if certain files exist at a certain location, and creating new directories, deleting, and so on. So let's jump right in. Let me go ahead and begin by a comment here. So how to create directories. And next, I'm going to go ahead and import our OS module. Just import OS. And let's take a look at what our current working directory is. So let me do cur dir, and this equals os dot get current working directory. So cwd, and simply do a print to take a look at the actual working directory. So if I were to save it and run this, notice on the bottom it shows me the C drive, users, and so on is my current working directory. In other words, my last folder on my C drive is Python. So whatever I do, whichever files I save, they are saved currently in the Pythons folder. Next, let me go ahead and create another comment here. So creating a new directory. I'll show you this quickly. So let's go ahead and create one. So os.mkdir is pretty straightforward, by the way. I'm going to call it new directory 1, new dir 1, right? Something like that. And once it's created, let me save it and run it. Notice Python runs the code, but it doesn't really show me at this point. I'd have to go to my Windows Explorer and take a look whether the directory has been created or not. So let's navigate to our Explorer here, and here it is. Okay, so Python creates a blank folder called new dir1. Obviously there's nothing in this folder at this point. It's just within the Python's directory, and I have my new directory. So instead of going to Explorer and creating files and directories, I can use Python to do so. Let's get back to our code. So once the directory is created, I can always use the import time module, for example, to, let's say, slow things down. So if I don't want the directory created right away, I can specify the directory to be created after a certain interval of time. So for example, I can say something like import time, and then let the time sleep for let's say about 5 seconds. And then let me go ahead and in fact rename the new directory 1, and I'm going to call it new directory 5. Get my quotations. Great. So all I did was we told Python wait for 5 seconds before renaming the new dir1 to new dir5. Let's save it and let me execute this code. And it says that of course the file already exists. And the reason why we get this message is because obviously it's running the os make directory command again, okay? And the file exists. So let me get rid of this. There we go. Perfect. Now if I save it and run it, what Python would do is create a new directory. So if I go to my Windows Explorer, and about in 5 seconds it should create, there we go, it's new dir5 now. So it was 1 before and now it's 5. So you can tell Python accordingly when to create directories and whichever time. Let's go back to our code. Great. Let's see if we can remove the directory. So I'm going to say time.sleep again for about, let's say, 10 seconds. You can actually see. And I'm going to say os.remove, which is rmdir. And I'm going to call it, or remove the directory, let's say new dir5. So if I run this code now, obviously it's going to import the time and run these commands as well. It's going to rename the directory 1 to directory 5. So I'm going to get rid of this and just remove the new dir5, because at this point, if I go to my Windows Explorer, I already have this new directory 5. So let's go back to our code, save it and run it. Go to my Windows Explorer just to see. In about 10 seconds, Python is going to remove this directory. There we go. Okay. For 10 seconds, Python removed the directory from the Python folder. Perfect. So let's go back to our code. Now these are simple basic operations. So up till now we took a look at just basic file and directory operations, how to remove them, how to create them. Next I'm going to talk about how to create temporary files, and we'll get into more coding. So for instance, let's import the temp file. But before I import the actual temp file, the temp file module creates temporary files and directories. And it works on pretty much all supported platforms, such as temporary file, name temporary file, temporary directory, and so forth. And these are, again, high-level interfaces which provide automatic cleanup and can be used as context managers. So you can do something like mks temp, for example, or make temp directories. And these are, again, lower-level functions which require manual cleanup. So all the user callable functions, in essence, and constructors take additional arguments which allow direct control over, let's say, the location and name of the temporary files and directories. And the file names used by the temp file module includes a string of random characters which allow those files to be created in shared temporary directories. So this is important, especially when you're doing programming in Python, creating temporary files and directories and placing content within those directories, and finally removing them once your task is done is important. So let's take a look at how the temp file function works. So I'm going to go ahead, scroll down here, or in fact get rid of all of this for now, put a comment here, say working with temp file. Let me go ahead and import temp file. It's the module. Next, quickly write a comment again. I'm going to go ahead and create a temporary file and write some data to it so you can actually see how it works. All right, let's begin with our variable. So let's call it, I don't know, fp, for example. I'm going to call it temp file dot temporary file. Have it write it. So fp dot write. I'm going to say, let's say b and hello world. So just some text. Next, once this is created, let me put a comment here. So I'm going to go ahead and have it read data from the file, and then use our fp dot seek place 0, and then fp dot read, and this will be hello world because that's what we want to read. So hello world. Next comment here would be close the file, and it will be removed, and simply do an fp dot close. Okay, so creating a temporary file, reading the data, and then closing the file. Next, I can also create a temporary file using a context manager. So for instance, let me go ahead and place a comment here. So this is going to create a temporary file using a context manager, and I can continue with the code. I can say with temp file dot temporary file as fp. Simply do a write first and then seek and read. So in sequence I'm going to do all three operations. So it'll be fp dot write and have it write b hello world, and the next would be the seek. So it'll be fp dot seek 0, and finally our fp dot read. So these are our three ones. All right, let me fix the FP write parameters. Close the quotation after world. Perfect. And then, of course, I need to mention hello world. So it reads it hello world. So this is how you would create a temporary file using a context manager if you choose to do so. Next, I'm going to place a comment here. So file is basically now closed and removed. So both ways you can manage this. I can also go ahead and create a temporary directory using the context manager. So let me put a quick comment here. Create a temporary directory using the context manager. And let's go ahead and do this. So with temp file dot temporary file as tmp directory name, so dir name, just have it print out. So print, let's say created temporary directory, and it'll be tmp dir name. Let's run this code and actually see the temporary directory and see the output, whether Python creates it or not. So I'm going to go ahead, save it, and run it. And let's go to line 4. It says fp temp file, and of course the spelling is incorrect, so just go ahead and correct our spellings here. So it's save it, run it. Same thing in line 5 to define my variable called b. So let's fix the b part here. So fp write, don't need a comma here. Same thing, this is also correct. All right, great. Let's try one more time. And line 13 is temp file is temporary file, of course, the spelling. Let me fix the spelling here as well before we get another one. All right, great. So far so good. Save it, run it, and finally Python created the temporary directory temp file dot underscore temporary file wrapper object at that location. So this way you can create a temporary directory in Python. It's a powerful way of using this method when you're programming in Python. So practice, and let's move to the next lesson.